let me just start by saying something about why we're here. And I see John Earl at the back. He was part of the instigator for tonight's event. It's a concern of his. It's a concern of a lot of us that we know that there are great careers in finance available for both genders, for all different kinds of people, and we welcome everybody. So we think that it's important that you see role models who can present for you what career paths are like and give you something to follow. So we've invited women to do this. According to a July-August 2012 Harvard Business Review report, in the hot finance jobs, women are still shut out. That report showed that only 17% of employees in private equity are female, 15% in real estate finance jobs, and 18% in venture capital. Women in junior investment roles were only 14%. So the pipeline's not going to make things any better. You can't get to the top if you don't even start. We know women can be successful in finance, and we have 4 women here tonight to prove it. So I'm pretty sure that once you listen to them, you're going to agree with that. And I think what we'll do is just get started with the 2 we have, and as the other 2 join us, we'll invite them to join in the conversation. So I thought we would start with Catherine Besser and then Palmer Garson. And Catherine is Executive Vice President, Chief Operational Risk Management Officer at Capital One. So she's representing the corporate finance perspective today. And Palmer Garson, Managing Director and Partner at Carey Street Partners. So she's representing a Richmond firm, and the 2 New Yorkers are the missing in action, okay? So let me start and ask each of you, and we'll start with you, Catherine, alphabetical order. Would you say a few words about your own career path and comment about whether you found any special challenges based on your gender? And make sure your mic's on.
So first of all, I guess Palmer and I are proof that it's better to live in Richmond than in New York. I'll highlight that. I get the opportunity to travel to New York, and I think so does Palmer, and I always love coming home. So my first thing I would tell you is there are great jobs in Richmond. You don't have to go very far to find incredible careers outside of the very city where you're going to school. Now, I'll comment on a couple things. First of all, kudos to the men in the audience as well, who were not willing to let this just be kind of a female throwdown. And sitting in the front rows, you guys are, you're going to get our attention as opposed to all the people who sat in the back. Okay, so a couple things about me. I graduated from the University of Virginia. I have been in business longer than you have been alive. So there'll be a little bit of difference between my experiences and the things that you're thinking about, but I'll try to not let that get in the way if you don't either. When I graduated from the University of Virginia, my undergraduate degree is in government and foreign affairs and a minor in history. So I'm not a finance major. So you might ask yourself as we go through the evening, what the heck is she doing here and why is she talking to us? I'm perfectly open to those challenges. But I have spent my entire career, with the exception of my first year out of college, working in financial services. My first job out of college was with Procter & Gamble. I spent a year with them, and I will tell you, at the end of my first year, I had done more finance and business evaluations and calculations than I ever would have thought possible. I was in a sales job, which was not the right job for me, but the entire job was engineered around trying to understand the ROI on products, trying to understand where the company made money, trying to understand how to work with the different manufacturers and distributors of goods for Procter & Gamble. And I wished to the very bottom of my toes that I had taken more business school classes when I was an undergrad. But I had this liberal arts thing going on, and I don't regret that. But as it turns out, I would ultimately come to the University of Richmond and pick up a couple of business classes, including finance classes, to close the gaps for me in my career. My second job after I left P&G was to go to work for a company called Progressive, which is on TV a lot, the insurance company. It just so happens the only company that advertises more than they do is the current company I work for. So there's some themes there. But you know, here's what I would tell you that I have figured out over the course of my career, which is, look, there are far too few women in business, period. And the things that make women extraordinary in business are the things, quite frankly, that make men extraordinary in business. Women have just got to find the courage to get out there. Creativity, innovation, really understanding how business works. And there is nothing better than finance to teach you that. You do not have to be an investment banker. No offense, Palmer. She'll tell you why it's good to be an investment banker. But there are so many things that I have done in the course of 20-some years, coming up probably on 25 years, that are all about really understanding the economics of the marketplace, the economics of the products that you're trying to create, how a company goes round, what are the financials in the budgeting that you do, in the return on investment that gets created for the products that are out there. And look, you're looking at a history and government major. If I could pull this off, you definitely could. And imagine how much better it would be if you actually had the tools and education to do it. But what I found over my career is really the people who can get in and understand how business goes around. How do you make smart decisions? How do you take hard problems and break them down into sort of simpler issues? And those issues are often about where are you going to make money? Where are customers going to buy things? Where is there a profit to be made? Where are you going to lose your shirt if you go into that particular side of the world? And you think I'm talking about banking, but I'm also talking about nonprofit organizations because I sit on a lot of different boards. And I'm also talking about how the government runs and what politics look like, because I actually have engagement in those spaces as well. I think the interesting thing about what I've been exposed to, and Palmer has as well, is you will see that understanding how financials work show up in every aspect of your life. Your personal financials, any nonprofit organization that you want to be involved in, how you think about government. What is the biggest issue going on right now in the political debate? The economy. Smart people are in doing policy work and finance work and every part of that. And there is no business function that I have been involved in, and I've done a lot of them through my career. Operations, marketing, analysis, business development, corporate development, and I'm doing risk management right now, that don't actually have at their roots and in their foundation financial management. So Nancy called me and said, hey, Catherine, would you come talk about this? And I said, look, I'm not a finance major, but I have a finance career. And I can tell you that in every set of roles that my company and all the companies that I've been a part of have ever hired, the people who really understood at the core how the finances of any organization work are the people who have actually been able to achieve incredible success in their career. So I'm really interested in the dialogue that we can have tonight.
Good, thank you. And Palmer, a little bit about your career path?
Sure. I think what Catherine has just done is ask you to broaden your mind about how you think about finance and careers in finance. And I think that is really, really important because that will help you as you go forward in planning your careers to really think big picture. My background briefly went to Duke. I was both pre-med and they did have an undergraduate business major. I knew I'd get a little pushback there. But I loved business. My dad really wanted me to go to medical school. And finally, one day I said, you know, Dad, this is not really what I love. I love business. And so it's interesting, when I was trying to decide what to do, I had an offer from P&G to stock the shelves with paper products and go around in their various regions, and an offer from Mellon Bank and then Lehman Brothers. At that time, the investment banks were not coming south to interview for the two-year analyst roles. All Ivy League, and then they were going to the Seven Sisters. But I sort of had a bugaboo, so I went up there knocking on doors, got this offer from Lehman Brothers. I didn't take it because I was scared. I didn't know anybody who was up there. It sounded like a sweatshop, and I ended up going to Mellon Bank because it was safe. I also, at that time, the Darden School had a program where they would come and interview college seniors and offer people admission and say, go work for 2 years. So I took that acceptance. So I went to Mellon Bank for 2 years. Came to Darden, absolutely loved it, just thrived in the environment. Went to Solomon Brothers the summer of 1982. So I said, finally, I got to find out what this investment banking is all about. Well, the markets in '82 were dead as a doornail, and they had us putting together pitch books to send to clients like Coca-Cola. And I sat there going, how do I know what Coke needs? And so I went into the head of the entire department and said, I'm worried I'm going to leave at the end of the summer and not understand what investment banking is all about. How am I going to be able to make a decision? So he said, well, I can put you in mergers and acquisitions. They're so busy you won't see the light of day again this summer. That's what happened. I was working 120-hour weeks. It was crazy. I left at the end of the summer and said, this is not for me. This is crazy. So then I spent time saying, what else do I like? And spent a lot of time looking at corporate strategy jobs and got very interested in W.R. Grace, who was particularly acquisitive at that time, also Pepsi. But then I started talking to Morgan Stanley, and the fit with Morgan Stanley culturally was much better for me. And that's something to keep in mind. Whoever you're talking to, really understand the culture and spend a lot of time saying, how does it, I mean, try it on. How does it feel? And in fact, when I've thought about different job opportunities along the way, I've just sort of said, I'm going to make up my mind, but not tell anybody, and see if the role fits, right, as opposed to what I think others may want me to do. Long story short, went to Morgan Stanley, told them I really wanted to be in corporate finance because I thought the life would be a little easier. I show up the first day, they said, we're sorry, we are so slammed in M&A, you've got to go to M&A. I went home that night in tears going, how am I going to do this, right? And it was the ultimate bait and switch. But it was the mid to late 80s. I probably learned more in 4 or 5 years than I could have learned in 10 years anywhere else. But in terms of balance and thinking ahead, I thought, boy, I don't know how I'm going to be able to do this. And there were no women. I mean, in the M&A department, I think there were 100 people and 3 women. And the gal who was more senior than I just looked at her life and said, this is not what I want. I'll never forget, it's an important, quick story. Her husband won the Clio Award for the Diet Coke commercial. And at that time, the CEO of Coke, Robert Gozueta, was going to entertain him and honor him with a private dinner party in his home in Atlanta. She said she couldn't go because one of her companies might get a hostile bid that weekend. At that time, I had the responsibility to staff everybody in the department. And I said, I think they have flights from Atlanta. I mean, it stunned me that what might be the pinnacle of her husband's career, she was going to say she couldn't go. So I was sitting there watching this movie saying, this is not what I want. Long story short, took a leave of absence to come back to Virginia to help our family sell our department store business. My father had suffered a couple heart attacks, and so I came to help him through that. Because I wasn't working 100-hour weeks, I met and married my husband, and we went to St. Louis briefly. He then was recruited to Richmond to be the head of marketing for a public company here. And frankly, I was a little bummed out. I said, what am I going to do in finance in Richmond? And this was 1988, and there just frankly wasn't a lot. People set up a lot of wonderful interviews for me, and I had 2 children at that time, and they said, aren't you going to stay home with your children? And I said, I'm schizophrenic. I love it all. I love the work. I love my family. I think I can do this. And so one of my former colleagues in New York, whose family was from Richmond too, came back to Richmond, and we launched what became Jefferson Capital Partners. It didn't occur to us that we couldn't do it. We were certain we could do it. We put together a business plan to do principal investing, which I had done some at Morgan Stanley, and I really loved doing the principal side, which meant you're investing money in the deals, because you're really accountable for your decisions, the good ones and the bad ones. We all know a lot of M&A deals get done for lots of reasons other than the pure economics of the deal, right? And then you do the deal, and it's transaction, and you leave, and if the deal blows up, nobody's coming back to you to say anything. So I really love the principal side. So we started Jefferson Capital and did that for 18 years. And I really set up the infrastructure, raised all the capital. And the thing about the principal side, unlike the deal side, which I think Nancy goes to some of the statistics you quoted, the deal side of the business is tough, but it's tough for men too. It's all about lifestyle balance. I never experienced glass ceilings. I thought I could do anything I wanted to at Morgan Stanley. It never occurred to me. It was a personal choice for me as I was figuring out what I wanted to do. And I think that's something important. It's different things for different people, and your life is going to be a series of chapters. Don't worry that you've got to decide now what are you going to do the next 25 years. I think that you young people today, the world is your oyster, and you're going to see all these opportunities, and just know you're going to have that. And something might work for 2 years or 3 years or for 20 years, but keep your mind open about that. The reason I'm at Carey Street now, it came time to raise a 3rd fund. I had really raised the capital for our other 2 funds, and I felt like if I went out there to raise it, I was making a 10-year commitment, because I was not going to take commitments from folks that I wasn't going to be there to help do the deals. And my partner and I at that time, he loved doing the big deals. I love the smaller deals. And so we sort of had a philosophical parting in the ways. We are very good personal friends. Cary Street had been trying to hire me to come launch their institutional business. So it was sort of like being in private equity, but just focusing on one thing, which I hadn't done for a long time. And that's 5 years ago this month. I'm wearing a lot of hats. We're building the buses. We're driving it. And I'm really loving it. I really am. And we can talk more about that in detail later. But it has been a series of chapters, and they all sort of lead. And even if you're with a big organization for a long time, Catherine could tell you about her series of chapters within the institution, too. But I'm looking forward to the dialogue, because the way we can be most helpful is if you all have questions and things you're interested in.
Well, I have a number of questions. We do have 2 more people who are about 10 minutes out, I'm told. So what I plan to do is proceed questions with you, and then we'll have them join in the conversation when they get here. You know, you've had interesting careers. I actually had a career. I started off in GE, went through their financial management program, and I know I changed paths several times. You all changed paths several times, and I think that's really interesting. A lot of women or people I've talked to have had long careers. They actually have gone in different directions and ended up where they are. It's not just a straight linear path. What I thought I'd ask the 2 of you is, what changes have you observed in your industries over time, and particularly with respect to gender? I mean, you were both early pioneers in your businesses, and so how has it changed?
You know, I would love to tell you corporate America has changed as much as I think it needs to. I am one of 3 EVPs at Capital One. We are the 3 most senior women in the entire organization. There's only one level above that, which is to actually be a president. There are no women currently at Capital One that are presidents of the 10 presidents that we have. You know, as an executive vice president, I've been there longer than any of the other women who, the other 2. It's not like there's a big group of us. You know, it's not changing as fast as it should, but I think part of that is there are a lot of women that come into the workforce, that come into the world, and struggle with the same things that Palmer and I have, which is, you know, there's a little bit of not necessarily wanting it all, but wanting to try to figure out how to juggle things that matter. Palmer can tell you about her 4 kids. I have 2. They're teenagers. Just getting here tonight. My daughter is a junior. She's being recruited for Division I field hockey. She and her dad are at a field hockey game. My son has play practice. I have to get out of here and pick him up by 8 o'clock, and then I've got a conference call at 8:15. Like, it's complicated. And the things that you have to juggle often for a lot of folks are, and this is not just women, but it's more complicated for women, but it's true for men as well. Like, you've really got to be prepared if you want to climb to a certain level in your career to know that your day isn't about balance. Your day is, can you be standing in the right place at the right time until it's time to get up or go to bed? And there's not, I don't know what free time is, because free time is sort of some crazy notion that somebody created who obviously didn't have a robust life. There is no free time. I go to board meetings and I do things at work, and I have to do things with kids, and then I've got homework to do at night just like everybody else does. You know, there are things that I take home at night that I have to review and try to have dinner and try to spend time with my husband, and, you know, God knows everybody tries to get a little exercise every once in a while, and make it to the grocery store and do laundry. And, you know, so if you want to be in corporate America and you want to talk about having careers that are in corporate America, you got to get really comfortable. And I think college may teach you that better than anywhere does. You got to get really comfortable doing 100 things in the course of the day and being really sure that it wasn't about did you have good balance, it was did you make good choices? Were you in the right places? Did you do the social things and the personal things and the you know, in your case it's the education and study things that that should fill in, and, you know, can you make it through the day just because you're good at prioritizing, you're good at problem solving? Like, I can do a conference call, buy groceries, pick up a kid, actually at stoplights only, text, and kind of pull a whole set of things together in an hour that most people would think of as 4 hours of work. But you can't get freaked out by that. And I think, you know, the other trick, which I think men have figured out better than women, but I've learned this, I bet Nancy and Palmer have as well, you gotta outsource. I mean, there are like people over the course of your career who can help you do things, but women want to try to do it all, right? There's some mythical thing out there that says I'm supposed to be able to do all this stuff. Well, you know what? You can pay somebody to do the laundry and somebody to do the grocery shopping and well, I try not to pay people to raise the kids, but every once in a while. It seems sort of like an interesting notion, especially because mine are teenagers. You can pay for almost everything. But the trick is to really sort of come at your life and your career believing not so much that balance is important, but that you can figure out how to juggle lots of different things. And this is not multitasking. I don't try to do 6 things at once, but I can do 6 very different things in an hour and be focused in the 10 minutes that I need to on the thing at hand, and then let it go and pick up the next thing. And you know, I think that's really an important part of what you have to practice. It is a skill. It's not a thing that comes naturally to people, being able to pick up and drop very different tasks in the course of an hour and totally switch gears. But it's a skill. You can learn how to do that. It will make you incredibly successful, not just in the workplace, but you know, in life, I think, in general. But if you're going to work in a major corporation and you want to get to somewhere fairly high up in the organization, it's a requirement. You have to be able to do 6 to 10 different things in the course of an hour, changing gears and not really worrying about whether the last thing that you just talked about and the thing you're currently talking about have anything to do with each other. I can talk to the pediatrician for 5 minutes, and then I can talk to the CEO 5 minutes later, and you just have to go into those conversations fully focused on what you're talking about. And I believe, you know, college is an incredible time to practice that. So, slightly different answer than what you asked.
That's all right. Palmer?
You know, I do see some areas where corporations are getting a little more flexible. I cannot speak to the big corporations like Catherine can, but the smaller ones I've moved around, being creative so that they can get talent there. And this whole thing of when you're raising your children and trying to figure through that, I think there is some more flexibility. One of the interesting calls I've received in the last 2 months is a call from Morgan Stanley where they're reaching back out to alums, people who were in investment banking, and said, would you consider coming back here? I sort of went, what? But they're trying to reach out to women who were successful, who then went off and did other things because they realized they've got this lack of talent that they're looking for now that they think could really add value to the organization. But a couple of add-ons to Catherine's comments. My children have been amazed at how I can compartmentalize and do the same thing. Get on the phone with the CEO of a company, get off, walk back to watch their game, get the team meal ready, you know, as the vultures are coming in, the football team is coming in to eat, and move on. And I laugh because I say to the kids, one day I'm going to sit here and eat bonbons, right? And they just laugh because they say, you will never do that. The other thing is all the other activities, and if you did a correlation between women who are in business and who end up leading nonprofit boards, it's a very high correlation. Just look at Catherine's bio and you'll see that she is, if she's not doing it now, she's already done it or she's in the pecking order, right? And because they like those leadership styles, and frankly, we're not going to do it unless we're going to end up getting in there and have an impact. We're usually not so good at sitting at the side of the table for too long. So that just adds on to what you're doing. You have to realize you're not going to be doing everything perfectly. We were giggling earlier. People say, how do you do it? I go, some days terribly, right? And nobody got where they needed to. My children now tell stories that I don't remember about. Mom, I was always the last one picked up. I didn't realize it at the time. I thought they got picked up. That was great, right? So you have that. What's interesting is, and my children are getting older. My youngest is in college, but my daughters who are out working, and one of them's in the same program that Nancy was in at GE, is hearing what they're saying and seeing and doing and how they're sorting this out. My older daughter did the investment banking analyst thing for 2 years and said, Mom, how in the world did you, she goes, that is insane. And now she's off trying another chapter and trying, but I think she feels like she can do whatever she wants to do and she's going to figure it out. But have the confidence to get out there, explore, be creative, know that you've received a magnificent education and you have all these wonderful resources. The other thing I would add is network. People will always want to help you, and women want to help you. I will drop everything I have going on to help, mentor a young person who's trying to figure out what they want to do. And often they happen to be women who are saying, now what do I do, right? And not that I have the answers, but at least it's a way to have the conversation in a safe way. So always feel like you can do that, and you have magnificent resources here to take advantage of.
Well, we're now joined by our New Yorkers.
Yay!
Thank you for the challenges that you survived to get here. We really appreciate it. We know what that flight's like, and actually the two panelists who were here before you said this is why it's good to work in Richmond, but hey, we're glad to see you. Amanda Montgomery joins us from UBS. And Chelsea Babcock is a recent graduate, and she's at Morgan Stanley. And Amanda, what we did was ask everybody to start talking a little bit about their career path. And so I'm going to start with you and then come to you, Chelsea, because your career path's been a little bit shorter. And hear sort of what your career path has been like, and also any changes that you've observed for women during the course of your career.
I think that's working, right? Yeah, I actually, after graduating from Richmond, I went to work for Cigna Insurance for 2 years up in Hartford, Connecticut, where I was really just doing a lot of financial analysis of numbers, model building. And then after that, I went to business school at Northwestern at the Kellogg School of Business. Am I not working?
Is it on?
Okay, you're good. Okay. And when I graduated there, I went to New York and started at, it was Chase Manhattan Bank now, obviously JP Morgan, and went through their credit training program. And I spent a couple of years there and then went over to Credit Suisse, where I was doing the same thing basically, was working in the syndication group and lending money, which is kind of the primary thing I was doing. And then I'm trying to think now, let's see, it's been a long time. I moved there and I was getting a little bored of what I was doing and I was kind of wanting to try out some different things. So I moved on to the foreign exchange side of the business and spent about 2 years putting together structured products for different companies to help manage their foreign exchange risk. And to me, that was very mathematical. It was very interesting, but very mathematical. And I really missed kind of the company business side of things and looking at what companies do. So at that point, I went to a small German bank called BHF Bank that no longer exists, and like so many banks out there these days. And spent 2 years basically doing syndications again, which is putting together loans and selling to other banks, and putting together a CLO, a collateralized loan obligation. And during that process, as Nancy was saying about networking, it's such an important thing to do because through that process of working on the CLO, I met a number of people at different firms and ended up being asked to go interview at Lehman Brothers. And fortunately, I stayed there for quite a while, but not too long, and had a great experience there. Went over there as a leveraged finance banker. Loved the job, absolutely loved the job, but it was a 24/7 job. I was constantly traveling, working, every meal I had was at the firm, but I loved it. I loved what I did, so it really didn't bother me. I then met my husband, and canceling dinner every time that he wanted to do something, working every weekend, not being able to do much, started to get a little more frustrating. And at that point, I had an opportunity to move into sales. So I moved onto the sales side for high yield bonds and loans. And that was great. I mean, I enjoyed that. It was much more manageable. It's still a lot of hard work, and you have to spend a lot of time, but you control it more. I mean, you can decide when you're going to schedule dinner with a client. It's not as if a client's calling you and saying, drop everything, you have to do this now. So it's much more manageable, but still long hours. And I enjoyed that a lot. And then a gentleman at Lehman Brothers went over to UBS and brought a whole team of us with him. So that was in 2000. And I basically stayed at Lehman Brothers, UBS since then, and moved from the sales role back into the, not to the leveraged finance side, but the capital markets, which is kind of in between sales and leveraged finance, where it's still on the trading floor. It's very close to the markets, but a little more like the leveraged finance in terms of the demands on you, but it was much more, I liked it better. The sales was great, but you know a little about a lot of things, and I was a much more detailed person and wanted to know a lot about less things, and enjoyed that a lot. And then I was doing that until about 2007, when everything kind of fell apart, and started managing down a lot of our risk exposure that we had, because we had underwritten a lot of deals that we were unable to sell. And so we really had to focus on getting that risk down, like all the other banks were doing. And through that process, I was kind of managing this portfolio. Then they asked me to take over the loan portfolio. So like all banks out there, some banks actually lend money because they want to lend money. The investment banks typically lend money to enhance their relationship with the clients so that they can get other business, because the clients expect them to lend money at below market rates. Not to say there's some loans we make that actually make money and stand on their own, but many of them, you lend money to them so you can get their equity deals, so you can get their bond deals, so you can get their M&A mandate. So my job is to manage that whole portfolio of all those relationship loans, because they still are the same risk as any other loan out there. They just happen to be below market rate. So we have about a $54 billion portfolio at UBS of those loans, and have a team of about 30 people, both in the US and London and Australia. And it's been great. It was a great move for me. It was a great, interesting change for me, and actually it was a great balance for me in terms of my life too, because it is very demanding, a lot of things I have to do, very different things between looking at credit default swaps, managing our internal regulatory adherence to all the rules which keep changing and be adding to, as well as looking at companies and evaluating the credit risk of those companies. So no day is ever the same, and I really like what I do, and I feel very lucky to have found a role that I like. And all the different things I did along the way, I think they've all helped me be better at this role now. So as much as it sounds like I jumped here, jumped there, it was always because I was trying to figure out what job was the right job for me. And at the end of the day, I feel like I kind of found that right job for me that's perfect for both my intellectual stimulation as well as my kind of work-life balance. And I'm married, and I have 3 children, a 12-year-old, a 4.5-year-old, and a 2-year-old as of Monday. So that's my
pretty amazing women,
background.
Aren't they? You didn't hear Catherine and Palmer, but had you would have realized that, yes, they meandered in life too. It seems that the path hasn't been linear, but you've all ended up in pretty good places. Now, Chelsea, you just graduated a little over a year ago. So tell us about why you chose finance as a major, and how the career's gone so far.
Okay. I apologize for my voice. I caught the same virus that the entire trading floor has back up in New York. But I came to University of Richmond knowing that I wanted to major in business and concentration in finance. I grew up around the industry with my family in financial advising, and always going to conventions and being told that there is a tremendous opportunity for women out there in both private wealth management, working in an investment bank, and being a financial advisor. When I came to University of Richmond and started in the finance course, I progressed to Smith, the Student Managed Investment Fund, where I was then exposed to the big Wall Street banks and sales and trading and investment banking. I had a summer internship for a private equity firm up in New York. And then I was lucky enough to get my foot in at Morgan Stanley, where I am now an analyst for fixed income sales and trading, and I work on the e-commerce desk. And I'm dealing with an analysis of the electronic flows that Morgan Stanley trades via our internal electronic systems and through vendors. And it's extremely interesting because my desk works closely with regulators and embracing the new Dodd-Frank regulations and CEF regulations that could be in effect in the next coming months.
Well, Amanda and Chelsea, what's it like to work in New York?
I'll go first. New York is one of the most incredible cities in the world. Nothing compares to it. And even when I was young and single, it was fantastic. And even now that I'm more settled down and we live about an hour outside of the city, my husband and I try and find as many opportunities to go to New York as we can, because the cultural aspects of it, the food, the restaurants, just wandering around the city, and we bring our children in there, and it's a great place to live. I would recommend it to anybody, even if it's just for a short period of time, because it's an experience doesn't really compare to living anywhere else, at least in this country.
Is the work environment different, do you think? Is it much faster paced than it might be in another city?
I think so. I mean, the industry is fast paced, so I think part of it's the industry. Now, if you had an investment bank in Chicago, I would expect it would be very fast paced too. But there's something about New York is everything's fast in New York, which sometimes is perceived as being rude. because people are just kind of trying to get to where they want to be and not really cognizant of what's going on around them sometimes. But that's kind of the excitement of the city too.
What about you, Chelsea? Happy to be in New York?
Yes, definitely. I agree with Amanda. It's very energizing being in the city. You work long hours, but you get out of work, you're going to dinner, you're meeting up with friends. There's a fair amount of people that I went to school with that all work up in New York with me. There's something to do every weekend, somewhere to go, people visiting. It's a great place to start off a young career.
Do you feel it's a little more competitive or faster paced in the work environment, or it's all you know right now? So
yeah, it's pretty much all I know right now. It is extremely competitive, just seeing the other analysts that are my year at my firm and knowing people at other banks. But it's definitely exciting, and it's good to hear about others' experiences and knowing exactly what you need to be doing for your next steps in your career, and bouncing that feedback off of everybody else that's working in New York.
Palmer, today in Richmond Biz Sense, they said that Cary Street Partners was the 3rd largest investment bank brokerage in Richmond, and that's where you work. Could you talk a little bit about the investment banking, financial services industry in Richmond, and then we'll hear from you, Catherine, about the corporate culture in Richmond.
I think, first of all, there are a lot of good things going on locally, and I am constantly surprised about the new initiatives popping up, and whether it be in investment banking, and you all know most of who the players are, and a lot of them, as Nancy said, were ranked today, and I'm not quite sure how they were ranked, but whether it's a Davenport or a Harris Williams, which is a pure play investment banking boutique, and I know they've been out here and talking to graduates and students alike, whether it's that or whether it's young, vibrant startups that need people with financial expertise. I was meeting with somebody today, and my phrase was, they need a little adult supervision. They have a fantastic idea, they've never been through it before, and you just want to help them not make some of the most obvious mistakes that are often made. And to me, that's so exciting. And I think often when young people are looking for opportunities, I often encourage them to say, find out if there's a project you can help them with. Can you do an internship? Can you get in there and show them what you can do? And I heard this story just this afternoon where a young person did, and he proved himself to be indispensable in 3 months. And guess what? They hired him and then made up for the back pay that they hadn't paid him for those 3 months. So, you know, be creative and don't be afraid to say, let me help you solve an issue you may have. So whether it's financial services or broader, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree. My comment earlier was, Manhattan's a fantastic place to visit. I just didn't want to live here. So I'll give the Richmond landscape on corporate. You know, I think for a city this size, there's a fantastic business environment in Richmond. If you think about the landscape that's here, first of all, there are half a dozen Fortune 500 companies headquartered here, and they run the gamut. If you're thinking about what you want to do when you graduate, you know, one of the major energy companies in the country is headquartered here. It's Dominion. One of the major packaging companies in the country, Westvaco, is headquartered here. You know, one of the major products companies in the world, Altria, is headquartered here. Beyond that, you have some incredible education institutions. You know, the one where we're currently sitting, but there are quite a number of colleges. There are major medical organizations. If you think about the hospitals that are here, I happen to sit on the board of the VCU hospital system. They're a hiring machine trying to become a Tier 1 cancer center. But medicine, people think is the doctoring side of the world. I will tell you the business and finance side of the world is where it's at right now in healthcare. If you think about all the healthcare reform that's underway and how much in the next 10 to 20 years the careers in healthcare, especially on the financial side of it, as people try to figure out how to make that equation go round, they're phenomenal. You know, most, if not all, of the major banks have some presence here. Certainly, I happen to work for one that has major presence here, but there are many banks that have presence here. So you've got financial services as a pretty important part of the corporate landscape or the business landscape in this community. There are significant nonprofits in this community that, you know, everything from the Community Foundation to the United Way, that also have as a very important part of the backdrop of what they're trying to deal with, how they manage finances. Finances and nonprofits have become sort of critical conversations. There's not a nonprofit organization, whether they're thinking about the investment side of the world or the fund development side of the world, that isn't looking for financial expertise, both in the boards that they seat as well as the organizations that they're trying to hire. And some of them are pretty substantial. The Community Foundation is just one good example of, that's almost $1 billion fund. So there are huge dollars in play in those structures as well. And then one of the fascinating things I think about the business community, Nancy and I sit on a couple boards together as well around the chamber and economic development, is this is really a booming market for entrepreneurs and business leaders. I have good friends who have started marketing companies and who have started brand companies and who have started all kinds of service companies, all of whom will come forward and say, will you look at my business plan? And at the heart of that business plan is, how am I financially going to make this work, right? There are no entrepreneurs in the world who don't have to understand, whether you're Bill Gates or whomever, right? Steve Jobs, who's obviously no longer with us, you do have to understand the dynamics of how to make that business go round. And at the epicenter of all of that is, can you think like a finance person? No matter what sector you want to go into. And so, I jokingly told Nancy when she asked me if I would do this, in spite of the fact that I don't have a finance degree and really wish that I had at some point in time, gotten to that.
We can handle that.
Yeah, I know. If I had one more free hour tonight, I would start my advanced education. I can point to all the things that I touched in this community and the things that I'm involved in and tell you there are more career opportunities for people who deeply understand finance, whether you think of it as finance or accounting or investment or wherever you think about the concentrations. Careers are out there just waiting for people in the business world. Unfortunately, there are just too few women who have the confidence to take it up. And you're looking at 4 up here who've done it, and I don't know that any of us would tell you that we are smarter than anybody sitting out in the audience. We just sort of were willing to take it up. I think if you get in there, you'll figure out it's not so much that it's hard as much as it is, you've got to just know that there are lots of choices out there that you can make if you've got the right sort of education and degree to get there.
We invited people to send in questions that they had, and now I'm going to ask some of those questions, and then we'll open it up and allow you to ask some questions. So the first question that was submitted online, and Chelsea, let's start with you. Do women have a better ethical compass than men in the financial services industry? And we do have a number of men in the audience, so be kind. But what do you think, Chelsea?
Generically, women are a little more conservative and when it comes to risk. So you can read articles out there, would the financial crisis have happened if banks were run by women? But that's a difficult question. I do agree that women are a little more considerate and think about all of the risks that go into something. The way a woman thinks is different from the way a man thinks, and they will consider the consequences maybe a little more readily than a man would.
Anybody else?
I would just say I think women are more relational. And this comes back to the networking standpoint. Women are outstanding networkers if they focus on it, and it's that relational side. So I think it makes it harder for them to go against that compass if they've got those relationships.
Now, just to defend some of the men in the room, or some of the men I work with, I do think the generation of, I think about my peers, I think about my husband, I think about my son, I think this generation of men that are coming up into the business world now are thinking about all of the elements of life in a much more comprehensive way. They want to be good fathers, they want to be really involved in their kids' lives, they want to be deeply engaged in the relationships around them. And I think it's different than what I saw with my dad, for example, who was much more transactional about what he thought his responsibilities were and what he delegated to my mother. I don't see that in the men that I work with or the men that I'm in the community with. I see a very different type of, and especially with my son, who's a little bit younger than most of you are because he's a sophomore in high school, but he is all about relationships now and how engaged he is in the community and how thoughtful he is about, his relationships with friends. So I think it's changing. I think, quite frankly, the generation, especially in college, the generation of men and the generation of men that I see my company hiring are way more involved. I don't think that some of the challenges that happen in the financial industry probably would have occurred if probably, quite frankly, more of you were in charge, period. But I think that's because there's a broader set of accountabilities and a more openness to people saying, I want to be considerate of all kinds of people. I think this particular generation is more thoughtful in general about diversity, and as a consequence of that, more thoughtful about what their responsibilities are. So, go guys.
Amanda, you were in New York during the financial crisis, so what's your take on this?
I think there's unethical people on both sides, both women and men. I think the biggest difference I see between women and men as it comes to just the way they act in businesses, women seem to be the same. Again, I'm making generalizations, so everyone's different, but as a whole, as a group, women take things more personally, so they kind of are consistent in their treatment of things across their personal life and their professional life, and they carry it with them. Like if a woman, like I know for myself, if my boss yells at me, I'm probably like, oh my God, I'm worried about it for like days. He probably forgot about it the second after it happened. And I've seen two men scream at each other and swear at each other in a meeting, and then 5 minutes later they're like grabbing lunch together. And it's like women, they're just different, just a different way to approach things. So I think as a result of that, some of the men, I see these men that they do things at work sometimes that I'm like, I can't believe you're doing that. That's just kind of slimy. But then they're like going home and the best father they could be. Like it's almost like they're jerks at work, but they're great at home. And I just think some men find it easier to do than the women do. I think women are more consistent across. And again, I think there's wonderful men out there and many people who are very, very ethical. And I think it's not the norm that men are unethical in any way, shape, or form. But I just think it seems like it's easier for them to take themselves out of it and say, well, this is just for work. That's work. But that's kind of some of the experience I've seen, in my life in New York now. Maybe the guys in Richmond are better, but I completely agree with you that the younger generation, I do find that the new analysts coming in are more conscious about everybody than both male and female are, than the guys who are probably, in their 40s, who kind of grew up in a different generation.
Some of you have alluded to this, and it's true for 3 of you, and I'm confident the 4th one will also have it all. So can you have it all? There was just a recent article I took quite exception to, saying, no, women can't have it all. And I also have 4 children, 8 grandchildren, and I have a daughter who just had her 4th child and is working. So it always seemed to me that was exactly the way the world should work. But could you talk a little bit about that? And Catherine, you have talked a little about your day. What was your day like today, Amanda? And how does it work out?
Let's see. I wake up at 6. I jump in the shower. I then wake up my 12-year-old, say, get in the shower. He, of course, doesn't get up right away, so I have to go back 3 times. So I go down and start making his breakfast. I then get his breakfast out and go upstairs, and hopefully he's already in the shower. My husband's in the shower then. I then get my daughter up, get her dressed. My husband's getting our little guy up while my 12-year-old's eating breakfast. And then my husband puts Connor, the baby, in the car, so at least I can get Julia's shoes on, everything, put her in the car, and they both go to daycare at my office, so they come with me each morning, and then my husband gets Christian in the other car, grabs the dog, takes Christian to school, drops him off, and then takes the dog for a walk. So our morning is like this craziness, and when Christian doesn't get up, it throws everything into the mix because I can't have his breakfast ready.
Thank you for letting us all into your household, because we all have that picture.
So that's it, and then the rest of the day is easy because I'm like, hey, they're in daycare, I'm fine. I'm home, and it's the 2 little ones, I take them home. I'm calling my husband saying, can you put the water on for the pasta? He's like, do I really have to put it on now? I'm like, honey, that'll save us 10 minutes when I get home. I'm like, you don't realize that. They're going to be hungry. And I've got cheese sticks, those little ones, those string cheese things. I hand them to the little guys in the back of the car so they've had something in their stomach. So when we walk in the door, they're not melting down. And my 12-year-old, of course, is hungry because he's always hungry. And I'm trying to stop him from eating something that's bad for him so he can actually get something that's reasonable for him to eat. And then we try and sit down as a family and have dinner. But doesn't all quite work out. But you know, that's what life's about. I mean, some people don't like that busyness. I thrive on it. I rarely sit around and just watch TV. Like I'm folding laundry, I have the TV on, but I'll be folding laundry, I'll be sorting through something. I'm always doing something else. I can't, my husband says I can't relax, but I don't consider that to say a bad thing. It doesn't bother me, it doesn't make me more stressed out. It's very satisfying for me to complete a task. So even if it's something stupid like sorting through magazines and taking out the recipes I like, I mean, that to me is satisfying because I'm not going to throw away the rest of the magazine. I feel like I've done something. If I'm just sitting there watching TV, I don't really feel like I've done anything, unless it's something really interesting that I'm trying to watch, you know, and learn something from.
Palmer, your days are, do you have any children left at home?
None at home now, so I don't have this you
Frenetic.
know, the whole rat race of getting everybody out the door, but I can remember it like it was yesterday. But I'm doing a fair amount of travel. I mean, I'll be in New York 5 times between now and Thanksgiving. I was in Asia for 10 days in May. Spending a lot of time identifying managers that we think make sense for our clients' portfolios. And so that is so interesting, but it throws everything a little, we still have dogs at home, so you know, you have that, and a husband who occasionally would like to see me, and he can watch TV. I cannot watch it, right? And there are probably some interesting characteristics like that we would all sort of share with each other because it's sort of a wasted minute. I can relax when I get away from home and the to-do list, but we're on the 6 a.m. special, heading out to Salt Lake City tomorrow, so there's always something like that going on. But I'm managing my team and the business I'm in the middle of these markets right now is non-stop, right? So I get up very early. My team gives me a lot of grief. I get up about 4:30 in the morning, and I'm just wired that way. And so I'm checking what happened in Asia overnight, how the European markets opened up, what is all the news, just to sort of get that sort of under my belt so I've got some sense, because otherwise our market strategist is calling me saying, I think we should do X. Well, I want a point of view, right? I want to be able to say, I don't think so, and here's why. And I'm not reluctant to offer my point of view, but I want to, instead of winging it, which I think is another difference sometimes between men and women, they're very confident, say, I want the facts, right? And I wanted to be able to back it up. So today, for example, he wanted to sell a manager, and I said, I don't think so, and here's why. He goes, I hadn't thought about it that way. You're right, let's stick with it. But I had to get up and do some work in order to feel confident enough to be able to give my point of view. So it's sort of the craziness is a little different. But back to the having it all, I think it all depends on what is the definition of having it all. And do you feel fulfilled? And are you able to prioritize and get the things done that are important to you? And there are many more days that aren't perfect and don't according to plan. I mean, and I'm sure this happens to everyone here. You go in thinking this is what you're getting done. Something happens, you get a call from a client, important customer, and it sort of changes the whole nature of the day. But you have to be flexible and just roll with it. And I think this compartmentalizing and be able to start the next day, I don't care how rough a day it's been. I was up in New York during the flash crash and was speaking to a conference that night. It totally changed what I was going to need to talk about, right? But I had to sort of shut that out and move on. You couldn't fret about it. So when you have those days that are a little rough, you've got to put it behind you. And I always say the next day I'm up, I've got my helmet on, I'm ready to go back into the game. I do think athletics is a factor we should talk about at some point. Because I do think athletics, I think when I meet young women who have played sports, it gives them, and it doesn't matter if it was college, but if they played sports in high school or were in some sort of competitive situation, maybe it's a debate team, where they had to pick themselves up by their bootstraps in the middle of adversity and carry on, you know that not everything has gone perfectly. They have skinned their knees. They've had to skin their knees, right? And I do think sometimes in today's world, parents sometimes want to make it all perfect for their children. They need to fall down and skin their knees because when they come into the working world, you are going to skin your knees and you're going to have days that don't go so well. So I often find athletics, and you can use so many analogies in business when you're trying to make points with teams. I think it helps a lot. Believe it or not, I was point guard at Duke my freshman year. I quickly realized, ooh, I am not big enough, and I'm not sure I'm mean enough. But I learned a lot from that experience. I get teased about it from my team at work a lot.
I bet you did just fine. Chelsea, what's your day like?
I get into the office at 7, catch up on the markets. I'm in I get in a little before everyone else on my desk, so then, like Palmer said, I can catch up on reading and know what's going on in the world. As soon as the day gets going, you kind of get caught up and can't ever catch up on the morning reading. throughout the day, I'm on the trading floor, so it's pretty busy and exciting all day long. I typically get out around 7 or 8 o'clock at night, depending if I'm meeting with clients. Fortunately enough, I've been at work for a little over a year, so I'm starting to forge relationships with clients and get taken out and to dinners and some events. So those are always exciting. But then after work, you get adjusted quickly. It was an adjustment going to New York and working those long hours, and you're working all day long. But I'm constantly busy. You have to be a news junkie where as soon as a headline comes out, everybody's talking about it at work. And I was fortunate enough that I'm in a big firm that spends a lot of time and energy on training their analysts and assistants. We've just begun, I had a 2-month program when I started up there where it was analyst only, and we went through and had courses all day long, took our series exams. But now, being a year on the desk, we actually have mandatory classes once or twice a week that all analysts and associates have to go to, so they're constantly investing more money into us and learning not just the product that you're focusing on every day, because you can get very focused on just your one product or your one area, your daily task, but I'm going to some mortgage security classes where I was down running credit books the other day.
Let me throw out one more question from the submissions, and then we'll let the audience ask some questions. So given the recent industry and regulatory changes, is there a class, a topic, or an experience you wish you'd signed up for during your earlier education and career? What skills do you think will be in demand that might not have been part of yours when you first got into this business? So anything you think somebody should take, and what skills that you think people are going to need going forward? I'm going to start over there again, Amanda.
Yeah, I'll start with that as one. I don't even know if it's offered at Richmond. I know it was offered in business school, and I did not take it. A game theory class. I just thought that was, people who took it and just, part of the markets is game theory, trying to figure out what people are going to do based on what's going on. And you can always explain something after the fact. I mean, the Japanese yen strengthens. You can find a reason why, but was that really the reason why it happened? I mean, you can justify it, but was that really the cause? But I think it's a lot of it's what happened that caused someone to do something, and so it comes up in trying to figure out what the markets are doing. It also comes up in terms of they're really impressive, and people listen to them, and to again learn that skill by having an opportunity to practice it in an environment that's unthreatening, that you could screw up in. No one's going to ever it's not going to hurt you long term, and I think it's a great thing to do and take advantage of it if you have that chance.
Catherine?
I'll pile on to the debate piece. I debated all through high school and did in college as well. It is remarkable what it teaches you in terms of structured thinking, analytic thinking, evidence-based thinking, and just quite frankly, how to go toe-to-toe with somebody who's arguing, about something theoretical that, you may or may not agree with, but you learn how to formulate the arguments. Almost anything that will teach you public speaking, whether it's debate, some people, I think about Toastmasters. It doesn't matter. If you can't speak publicly and you want to be fairly senior in your career at some point in time, those two things are just a collision waiting to happen. The other two I would tell you to think about, and they're off the beaten path. Boy, the world is just wrapped up in contracts and legal stuff now, and I don't know whether the business class or the business school teaches an undergraduate class in contract law, but you have to have something that gets you prepared for the amount of stuff that goes on out there related to regulation, related to law, related to technical reading. There just is no business, and there's certainly no business career, again, if you're going to be senior, where that is not going to be front and center at some point. So thinking about how to get some exposure to the contract legal side of the world. And then the third one, which I know Richmond actually does do, is you can't get there without technology. And I'm not talking about how to use your iPhone or your iPad or your iPod or any other i that you have. I'm talking about literally the technology where data is stored and information happens, and the decisioning software that is behind kind of every major business in the world. And it's certainly true in financial services My company runs almost $2 billion a year in technology portfolio investments, which is a big number. And it doesn't matter where you are in the business. If you don't understand technology and architecture and systems, even a little bit, like conversationally dangerous, will get you a long ways in your career. And part of that is that you understand what people are talking about, and you can ask smart questions. You don't have to teach it, do it, or figure it out for a living, but you've got to be able to understand what's being discussed. So technology would be my third one.
I would certainly add that the ability to articulate your point, both verbally and in writing, is absolutely critical. So however you get that, and I think in today's world of text and emails, that's becoming a lost art. And one of the rules we have at Cary Street is if you cannot say it in an email in 2 sentences, you pick up the phone and call, or you put it in an attachment as a Word document, because more misunderstandings happen as a result. And tone, often it seems so much harsher in email. And some people will hide behind it and say things they would never say if they were looking you in the face. So just remember that. 2 other things I would add is organizational behavior. Nancy and I were chuckling about this earlier. I had so many folks that said, oh, that class, it's so soft and touchy-feely and all that. I spend so much time building consensus, and whether it's in the investment committee at Cary Street, whether it's on the board at Cary Street, other boards I'm on. When I did private equity, most of my time was spent getting the other co-investors in the canoe paddling in the same direction. And I found often I was the only woman in the room often, and if I didn't call the guys and say, are we going to have dinner the night before the board meeting? They would never think about it often because everybody's just arriving in time. But the meetings would go so much better if you spent that time together. The last thing I would say, and it's much more to experience it than pick it up in a class, but travel abroad and get to the emerging markets, because it will change the way you view the world and think. And I had an opportunity to spend 10 days in China 3 years ago, and I read the paper a lot differently now, because a big part of the course was to leave my Western views and biases at the door and to step into the shoes of the Asian community, and particularly the Chinese, and understand why they think the way they do, why they see the world the way they do, and how they arrive at decisions the way they do. I read the Financial Times now before I read the Wall Street Journal, because I think it's less biased and it has a more balanced viewpoint. And that's going to help you no matter what you end up doing. So however you can get that experience, and I know there are magnificent opportunities here and at other schools, go do that. And you can find a way to get it financed. So don't let that put you off if you're trying to do that.
Well, we certainly encourage that. And Chelsea, is there anything we missed with you? Anything you wish we'd taught you that now you realize and you can inform us about?
I agree with what all the women mentioned, but specifically for my role, since I'm tied to electronic trading, I do wish I took more computer science classes or just had a general conversation language of understanding how we store data, how we can feed into that data and run our analysis.
Good.
There's probably one more thing, and Palmer mentioned it. Read the paper. Just read the newspaper. It is remarkable how much education actually exists, and I'm not talking about the sports page or the comics, but whether you read the Financial Times or the Wall Street Journal, or, I love when I'm in New York to pick up the New York Times and read that. Or, my husband one year gave me a subscription to the New York Times Sunday paper, because it was just a totally different set of topics and issues. Those will make you conversationally dangerous on a whole host of topics when you go to work somewhere, and that's huge.
There's something to be said actually for the actual physical paper, because when you put a paper down in front of you, you read stories you wouldn't read if you were just going through the headlines, because you see it and you start glancing through it and you start, oh wow, that's interesting. And so I find that even though I can get the Wall Street Journal online, I still prefer the paper there, and I love sitting down and just looking at it, and even if I'm just flipping through, pick up little bits and pieces of news, then I may want to explore further that I would never have gone to had I gone online and just looked up what the top stories were. So I think it's a lot. I don't have any stock in any newspaper company, because obviously they're becoming an antiquated form to a lot of people, but there is some real benefits to it.
And Chelsea described, going out to dinner. There's nothing easier than to go out to dinner with people you've never met and pick something, quote unquote, ripped from the headlines to talk about. It's the easiest way to talk to strangers. Let's say, hey, I saw this thing in the paper today, or did you read this, or I was reading this really interesting article. It just opens conversation. And those conversations make for really important business dinners.
They do. So, how about you? Any questions for this wonderful group? I know you do.
Nancy?
Okay, I can't. Oh, yes, there you are in the front row. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a question regarding changing jobs. Like, for example, if you're working in a company and you're doing your job, like say, for example, you've been doing it for quite some time now. When do you know that is the right time to transition into your next job? Probably just take out something else. Like, when do you know that now, like, it should be now and not?
Well, I can say having done it a bunch of times. You'll know when the right time is, because it means either you're not challenged by what you're doing anymore, or you see something else that you think you would be better at, or you feel like it's time to move on to something else. And I think one of the best pieces of advice I give my son, and I give anyone I know who's young and starting the job, is if you work really hard at the job you're doing, people are more than happy within your company to try and keep you and let you do something else. I've had many people within my group who wanted to go somewhere else, and I'd much rather them stay with UBS and go somewhere else where they want to go. So I'll help them do that because I think they're good and they've worked hard. So if they're just kind of an average worker, I wouldn't recommend they go anywhere and I wouldn't help them do it. But I'd much rather my firm benefits from the skills they have, than, even if it's not within my group, than go somewhere else. So if you work really hard and you prove yourself in any job, you're going to find that people are happy to help you do different things. And I found people to be whenever I've said I want to do something different, no one's ever said, oh gosh, you shouldn't be doing that. It was always like, it's great, we'd love to have you here. It was very comforting and surprising, but it's not as hard as it sounds when you think about it. But you'll know.
Other questions? Yes, Lucy.
There's a big debate as to whether you kind of have to fit in and be like a girl's guy, or whether you can kind of hold your femininity on the job and fit in that way too. I guess, what's the balance you guys have found, and how do you fit in with everybody at the job?
It's a good question. Yeah. Who wants to take that?
Well, when I was at Morgan Stanley, as I mentioned earlier in the M&A department, I was one of 3 women out of 100, and I never felt like I had to become somebody I wasn't. And as I've counseled a lot of young women, I've said, be who you are, because I think at the end of the day, first of all, you're going to be happier in your own shoes, right? And I think if you can't be successful being who you are in that environment, maybe it says something about that environment, right? And Nancy and I were talking about earlier about the language on Wall Street, and I don't know, Chelsea, would be interesting to hear what the fixed income area is like, but I'm sure the language is flying all the time, and you do become a little hardened to it because it's like going on all the time, right, and you get out. But it's just, at the end of the day, be who you are, and that'll work. But I'd love to hear what your floor, I'm sure there's.
Yeah, so what do you think, Chelsea?
Definitely be who you are. I think times have changed. I'm on the trading floor now. I don't have to act any differently than I was in the first place. It's just a matter of getting along with the team that you're with, being able to spend those long hours with them. It's easier when you can have a conversation with the person next to them with their interests. Doesn't mean I know all the sports stats that everyone else on the desk is talking about, and it becomes a joke because I don't know them at all. But yeah, I agree with you. Be who you are, and there are more and more women, even my analyst class at Morgan Stanley, coming in, and you have all strains of femininity at the workplace.
I'll be edgier in my answer to that one. Look, I don't know, it's been all over the news in the last 2 weeks, the women in the military who have been pressured by superiors to be in relationships that probably they shouldn't have agreed to, and the people they were working for shouldn't have asked for. Is that still part of the workforce? Yeah. Does it actually go both ways and in all directions? Yeah, it does. There's some truth to, there are parts of any organization, business, military, small companies, large companies, whatever, that there are people who will use their power, not for good. And I think the important thing to do is, first of all, try to not let yourself be put in that situation. And then secondly, if you find yourself in that situation, you go find somebody to talk to, no matter what, because there is not a tolerance for that in the workplace, in the military, in politics, in anything that's out there today, but it doesn't stop the behavior from happening. And I probably, Chelsea maybe hasn't experienced it, but I bet any of the three of us on this side would tell you that somewhere along the course of our careers, we have been in situations that were uncomfortable. And we were there because people had put us in those situations, and you have to get yourself out of it. There is nobody but you responsible for you. And, so can you be too flirty at work? Can you be too cute? Can you be underdressed? Sure, you could be all of that. No matter what, though, that doesn't make it acceptable for somebody to use that in a way that is inappropriate. And that's true for women, that's true for gays and lesbians, that's true for people who come from different ethnicities. It's true for anybody. And it happens. That's true as well. Find somebody to talk to, somebody else, somebody more senior, your HR folks. That's the way to get out of it. And if you believe in yourself, and your company or whoever you're working for is too stupid to stand behind you, you didn't belong there to begin with.
That's right. Thank you. More questions? Yes, go ahead.
It was mentioned earlier, this phenomenon of the glass ceiling, but I wanted to touch briefly on your opinions of the class quit, where it's this idea that women can be only so far in their careers until they succumb to competing parties to bear children and take care of the home. Do you think this still applies today, and if so, how do we combat against that?
They don't seem to have hit one, but who wants to take that on?
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that's come up many times when I've sat through diversity training and diversity events at UBS is there is a discussion about why are there so few women at, in more senior positions. And it becomes a debate. Is it self-selection, that women are selecting themselves out of it? Or is it that people aren't letting them get ahead? And I'm of the view it's more self-selection. Now, that being said, it's not necessarily that women are saying they can't do it all. I mean, some people truly want to only go home and raise their family. I mean, I would go crazy if I was home with my kids all day. I don't want to do that. My mother did it, and she was a wonderful mother, but I don't want to do that. Other people want to do that. Doesn't mean I don't look at it as they didn't make it farther. They made a different choice in life. So I think there may be, it's hard for the person who wants to be home with their kids and who's running out the door every day at 5 o'clock. Look, that's going to have repercussions. You're not going to be the CEO if you're running out, if you're working 9 to 5. It's just not going to happen. I mean, you have to be realistic about it. But that doesn't mean that if you want to be that person, you want to be putting in the time and effort. I don't feel like I'm being limited because I'm a woman. I've made choices about things. I mean, do I want my boss's job? I don't really want my boss's job. Now, if he left and they offered it to me, I'd probably take it, but I'm not going after it. I'm not, I don't, and I'm very happy where I am. I'm very comfortable and I enjoy it because I do have a balance. If I'm competitive enough that if someone gave me that opportunity to go after his job, because it was up for grabs, I probably would take it and have to rely more on my husband to help out at home and things like that. But I'm very happy in what I do, so I don't feel like I have to do that. So does that mean that I've hit a glass ceiling? No, I've made a conscious choice not to fight for that next level because I don't feel the need to it. I can be very, very happy. There are days I'm going to work and I try to listen to Bloomberg News on the way in, and sometimes I'm depressed in the news and I just have to put a song on because I feel like I'm such a lucky person with my 2 little kids in the back who hopefully they're not fighting. And I just feel like, I'm blessed, so I don't, want to hear bad news. But I think I don't think there's at least in my firm, I can't speak to my industry as a whole, but I think it's much better than it was years ago. I think there is a conscious acknowledgement that diverse workplaces make better decisions, or diverse companies make better decisions, and there's a lot of stats to support that. If you have portfolio managers that have a group decision that's made with both men, women, different races, different religions, that you make better decisions than a male-dominated or a female-dominated group, because you just get the different views and you put all that together and make better decisions.
Yeah, so I think I agree. I think there are a couple things that I would add. you know, I don't subscribe to the you can have it all. I subscribe to the you can have what you want. And the important thing is to know what you want. And that certainly changes over your lifetime, right? I think the other thing that women especially are starting to figure out, but I think it's still true of this generation of men as well, which is if you are sure that you want to do a big job, a senior job, then you've got to do some of the things that we've been describing. You've got to figure out how you're going to be good at relationships and social and how you're going to juggle lots of things. And you've got to love doing that. I mean, you have to love juggling. You have to love kind of that multiple things in the course of a day. And if you don't, then don't choose that, right? I mean, I think at the end of the day, what probably all of us would say, and whether you're early in your career or further along in your career, at the end of the day, are you doing something that you really love? Because it's not about whether you are a CEO or whether you're an executive or whether you're a partner running your own business. It's really about whether you are happy. Because a lot of people that I've seen in the course of their careers, especially women, are chasing what they think they're supposed to be, not what they want to be. Well, gosh, there's just nothing more tragic than that from the choices that you make. So I don't know whether there's ceilings or cliffs or places where people opt out or don't, but most of the people that I spend time with who are thriving are people who've made choices about what they really want to do. And I think to be senior in a corporation especially, because that's where most people refer to the glass ceiling, and we have all been or are in the corporate side of the world, you got to want it. You got to want it pretty bad. You got to want to juggle a lot of things. You got to want to get good at a lot of different skills. And if you want it, you can get it. But you got to go after it. And a lot of times women don't want to actually trade off some of the things that are required to pull it off. I mean, people are getting up at 4:30 in the morning. She's at work at 7, I won't finish up until 10:30 or 11 o'clock tonight on the sets of things that I have to turn in for tomorrow. Not everybody loves that. I mean, I'm not sure we're describing the perfect lifestyle, but it's working for all of us. Yeah. Those are the things I think you got to think about.
We have time for just one more question. Who wants to ask the last question? Anybody? Well, all right. In that case, we'll just thank these wonderful women, and we appreciate you coming. Thanks.